Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
You know, you said you didn't want to be a Prismari Command guy last week, but I think you might not have a lot of choices in this.
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can be a Prismari Command guy.
That's fair. There are more than one Prismari Command deck, I guess you could play. But I don't know, man. I think your prediction is going to come true in that Prismari Command and Friends is going to soon become the fun police. I think that might happen soon.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to... Well, where's the one that you're seeing right off the top?
I mean, we could just start with from the standard league that was this just past couple days. I think the 19th.
Uh-huh.
Top of the lists of the 5-0 lists, Air_Vengeance. This is just it. This is just a tight little 60 card deck. No frills. Just. I think that iterating off of this is actually where you want to be, but Air Vengeance is where I want to start.
Sure. So this is one of the many Alrun's Epiphany decks that we're seeing. The big thing here is just actually abandoning green of all colors, right? Like getting that acceleration, that ramping from treasure instead of from stuff like cultivate. And you're kind of really just, first of all, there's just a lot of new powerful cards here. But second of all, you're really taking advantage of some new cards that add a very powerful couple of dimensions, like Draconic Intervention, like we spoke about last week. First of all, obviously, that's a pretty sweet combo with Alrun's Epiphany anyway.
Well, I mean, is it just a sweet combo for a deck that's all dragons, right? Like, this deck has 3 Galazeth Prismari, 4 Goldspan Dragon for its Duders, and then there's 4 Torrent Sculptor, but haha, just kidding, right? Like, Torrent Sculptor's probably there for the opposite side more than the front side, although I do want to talk about that.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think you're tripping.
All right.
You want to hear the combo? Turn 2, we just use the quasi-cycling ability of Magma Opus.
Yep.
So we get a treasure on our opponent's end step.
And an 8-drop in the graveyard.
And then we untap, we drop the Torrent Sculptor.
Using the treasure, right?
Right, using the treasure, and then on just turn 3, we just have a 6/6 flyer, ward, a 6/6 ward. It's so wild that this guy doesn't fly, given the giant wings, but whatever. 6/6 ward.
I think those are torrents that he's sculpting. I don't think that's wings, although I can see that it is being looking at like wings. Obviously that's part of the range. I accept that, although that is what I wanted to iterate off of. Although I will just say, you tried to talk me into this card at the end of last episode and talk to me a little bit about Flamethrower Sonata. I mean, this stuff is the real deal.
Of course. I mean, that's the real sauce. I'm just saying that the appetizer is not too bad in this deck.
No. So I think this is a good place to start. I think that you could just play this 60 and do a lot worse. I think, which is silly to say about like a 5-0 deck from the first week, but it's just, I don't know. Until you start saying I want to screw around with the plan a little bit, I think this is just a great starting 60. However, I do want to screw around with the plan. That's the thing.
Yeah, sure. Plus, also, not every number in here is exactly perfect necessarily, and this particular build does have some blind spots. But what do you think of the 6 treasure token cards? Obviously Prismari Command is also, so there's kind of 10, but I'm talking, and there's more, with the Dragon and Prismari, Galazeth, Prismari, etc. But like specifically the Creative Outburst Magma Opus portion of the deck, obviously fueled by Goldspan Dragon and Galazeth Prismari.
I would actually, once I've gotten my dirty mitts on this card. I think that I would play even more of the treasure cycling type cards because I think that's where it's at. And I respect that this is a 4X Alrund's Epiphany, 4X Saw It Coming deck. I think you have to make room using Alrund's Epiphany because that's the only way that you can get expensive. No? You want to... I mean, I hate Shatterskull Smashing.
Dude, I want to play... Yeah, but Shatterskull Smashing's so good in this deck.
All right,
like, you end up with so much mana, because if you ever just... You're either Goldspan Dragon or Galazeth Prismari makes you such a big ramp deck for a blue-red deck. And then Alrund's Epiphany is just too good in this deck.
I agree with all those statements. However, I would like to paint a different picture for you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on the play, and I go first turn land, second turn land, end of your turn, cycle Magma Opus for a treasure, untap, play my third land, sacrifice the treasure, and rather than playing Torrent Sculptor or Galazeth Prismari, which are 4-drops that are actually in this deck, I drop for R3 an Ifrit Flame Painter. Just to remind everybody out there, Ifrit Flame Painter is a 3 and an R for a 1/4 double strike. However, it has some additional text. Whenever Ifrit Flame Painter deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. What do you think about that kind of Splinter Twin?
Splinter Twin?
Yeah, man. Magma Opus on the O. Draw extra cards with Magma Opus or Creative Outburst. Discard before the second double strike hits. Get him again. That is some kind of Splinter Twin, I think.
I'm not even close to interested in that in this deck.
Really?
I think you can build a different blue-red deck around that, but I think you want to build a different blue-red deck. Like, so this guy... He needs to get through, and it's not like, as far as blue-red decks go, this one's like overloaded on ways to ensure getting your guys through. And he doesn't work with Draconic Intervention. And there's a little bit of a win more thing going on here. You know, because like when you hit somebody and you get to just play 2 spells out of your graveyard, honestly, they could be cheaper spells and you'd still be just dominating.
I agree with all the statements that you made. Obviously, I'm just kind of starting from this point because this is a River Glide Pathway, Frost Boil Snarl, sort of Prismari Command shell that's already shown to be relatively successful. Probably you want to go maybe some Brazen Borrowers and Bone Crusher Giants and etc. If you just want to get the guy through. But the reason that I'm very excited about these 7 and 8 drop cards is because they're buddies. They get the Ifrit out on turn 3. Like, they're already there.
Yes, but lots of things kill the Ifrit. And the fact that the Ifrit doesn't work with Draconic Intervention, I don't know, man. But
I buy
it's
it.
Fine. That's a different deck. I think you can build that deck, and it's going to use some of the same cards. Like, obviously, Prismari Command is just amazing anyway. And then Alrund's Epiphany, that's a hell of a card to use with your Flame Painter. But I don't know, man. Like, how much are you really just in for creatures without it enters the battlefield trigger or some extra protect? Because, like, it's kind of interesting that, like, at least the Sculptor, when you do it, which is less than half the time, but at least the Sculptor taxes some extra and you get the better of it mana-wise. And then the Goldspan Dragon and Galazeth, they're both... Galazeth gives you a treasure straight up, and he might even be able to protect himself. But both the Dragon and Galazeth are very probable to keep ramping you even more so that you can get to the part of your game where you're just playing stuff like Creative Outbursts and Magma Opus and Alrund's Epiphany. This is also just such an unbelievable Alrund's Epiphany deck.
Like, yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing is that this deck could just play fair because of the interplay between the two dragons, right? Like, Galazeth Prismari is so good with treasures, and Goldspan Dragon is a treasure-making machine. You could just spit out 8s, and it ain't no thing.
Yeah, totally. Particularly when you've got all these other treasure-making cards, too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it's actually bad to just kill their innkeeper and play a treasure. And then be just that, be one more turn ahead.
Man,
But I do think that there's room in the metagame for some sort of a little bit different of a deck, the Flame Painter deck that actually uses the Brazen Borrower and Bone Crusher Giant stuff that you were mentioning. The use of some of the Bone Crusher Giant Brazen Borrowers, though, it's not like there's a shortage of that in the format. Alrund's Epiphany also showing up a ton in the Teamer Adventures stuff. Do you think Teamer Adventures is mostly just a holdover from the past format?
I do. I think that
all they really gained is Prismari Command, right?
Yeah, they're just kind of halfway there, right? Like, I think that those kind of decks are either going to want to become more aggro, like more like the Gruul version, or more big, more like this Air Vengeance's deck. And that, like, the middle ground is less exciting.
What did you think of the fourth place deck? So it's a Teamer Adventure deck with Luca Coppercoat Outcast. And so all your Bone Crusher Giants and Brazen Borrowers and Lovestruck Beast and Llanowar Visionary, that's a lot of threes. Well, what in the deck costs more than three?
Coma.
What? Exactly. Your good friend Coma the Cosmos Serpent.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, we were talking, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, that Luca just never plays a legitimate game of Magic the Gathering, only plays a nonsense game. Are you talking about the fourth place deck Alfredo Torres played in the Standard Challenge in the 18th? Just throw it out there. The Akroan War main deck is not friendly, right? You can Akroan War somebody, take their... What if you took a Llanowar Visionary, which has converted mana cost 3, stole it, and then used it to cast a Luca the Coppercoat Outcast the next turn after your Akroan War, and then sacrificed it to Luca Coppercoat Outcast? That would just be all kinds of unfun for the opponent. I mean, this is very clearly a kind of a bigger deck than.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking, like, is this doing enough for you?
I really like the Luca Coppercoat Outcast part of this deck. I think it's very cleverly built, like where you have all these. I mean, I hate to put it this way, but I feel like Edgewall Innkeeper is by far the worst card in this deck, despite it being an adventure deck. Isn't that kind of weird?
It's kind of weird.
Like, I mean, I feel like, I mean, I don't know. Is Edgewall Innkeeper still the best one-drop in Standard? Probably. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. It just seems to me like this deck would be very close to having some other potential incentives. Like, it's not so far away because you have Bone Crusher Giant and Brazen Borrower, which act like twos. This deck is Disdainful Stroke and Fire Prophecy in as instance, but it could be potentially a Karuga deck, right? It's very close to a Karuga deck if you wanted to go that direction. But I guess Edgewall Innkeeper will draw more cards than Karuga a lot of the time. And you do need to turn on Lovestruck Beast, so maybe I'm just crazy.
There is another Alrund's Epiphany deck, the 10th place Larry Fields 1990 played, that is a... so obviously, first of all, it's a Yorion deck, but it's a Sultai ramp deck built around Emergent Ultimatum. And it still just has the package of, Valky God of Lies, so you can kind of exploit the Tybalt side, and then Kiorabest the Sea God, and Alrund's Epiphany. But there are some new tricks, namely your girl, Professor Onyx.
Yeah, I was just wondering, if this were like a 60-card main deck instead of an 80-card main deck, would Professor Onyx have made the cut? Nope. Not even close.
Nope.
That is the definition of a 77th or greater card, right?
Yeah, although I do like it in this deck, and this is actually the exact case we talked about during preview season, because if you go get Professor Onyx, here we're actually you don't even have the Phyrexian in here, which I could kind of see a case for that. But the other new stuff that's in this deck is Quandrix Cultivator.
That's the big one. I love Quandrix Cultivator.
Which obviously search your library for a basic forest or island card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. It's a meaty ramp spell, right? Like this is, obviously you've already got Binding the Old Gods, which is kind of just the best of that kind of thing. But having access to more of that, and in this case having a 3/4 It's kind of nice way to actually just present more on the battlefield. It is a shame that you don't have more ramp spells at 2. I mean, this deck does make great use of Wolf Oil Haven, but that's kind of it, right?
Yeah, it doesn't play Tangled Florahedron, does it?
No, but what do you think of Eureka Moment, man?
I told you I liked Eureka Moment for the
I'm
second that
so
I saw.
off it. Dude, I'm so off it.
See that one Eureka Moment in this 80-card deck? You're going to see 4 Eureka Moments in 60-card decks. It's so good.
I don't know, man. Call.
I think Eureka Moment is like increasingly good in decks that have like Temple of Malady and Zagoth Triome, and like way worse in decks that don't have those kind of lands, I think.
So what do you think of the one copy of Solve the Equation?
So I don't know. It seems like super clunky to me. I mean,
Well,
I guess it gets the ultimatum if that's what you want.
So there's three, and I'm kind of possible, but there's mostly 3 things going on here. The first is that you can go get Emergent Ultimatum, right? And that's pretty good. But you can actually go get the right interaction with one extinction event, one Palaka Predation, plus getting Shadow's Verdict, and like having a little bit more flexibility there. One eliminate, etc. But then there's also, it's actually like I think a real thing to solve the equation for your Eureka Moment.
Sure,
That's the clunkiest stuff in the world, but man, against the right people. And then finally, of course, there's also just if the game stretches, Solve the Equation is like a thing you can put in your second Emergent Ultimatum split.
Yeah,
that's like always good.
I mean, that's the nail in the coffin then, right?
Yeah.
I would actually make a comment on that then. This deck has got 1 Extinction Event. Solve the Equation costs 3. Extinction Event costs 4. That's a nice 3 and a 4. You've got a very missing card in my opinion then, which is, I think I would want Migration Path, right? Like, you could solve the equation for Migration Path 3 and a 4. Like, this deck has got Bind the Old Gods, and it's got Quandrix Cultivator at 4 to ramp, neither of which are a sorcery. So, I don't know. What do you think about that? Let's play 1.
Yeah, I would play 1 instead of Eureka Moment. I'm with you, man. I think there should be 1, just instead of Eureka Moment. But whatever.
I guess you can get the Eureka Moment, but that's not nearly as good as Migration's Path in that.
I know. That's why I like Migration.
Like, Migration's Path is just, that's 4 into 6 into 7, which is just straight where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, Eureka Moment is only 4 into 5 into 6, which is a whole turn off of where you want to be.
Right. Dude, I'm not arguing in favor of Eureka Moment. No, it needs less. It needs 1 Migration Path.
It definitely needs a Migration Path. There's no doubt about that.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because there's only 1 Solve the Equation. It's not like that's that big of a part of the deck, man.
I guess we've just changed the deck to be 4 Solve the Equation, 4 Migrations Path.
It's too clunky.
Yeah, I think that Solve the Equation on turn 3 is something that you do if you're going to get, like, Extinction Event or something along those lines to defend yourself, or it's something that you do deeper than turn 7 because you're going to triple up or something.
So if you're going to play Yorion, what do you think of playing Callous Blood Mage in Sultai? This is that 2 and a black Vampire Warlock, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you choose 1, and your 3 modes are create a 1/1 pest. When it dies, you gain a life, or you draw a card and lose a life, or exile target player's graveyard.
I mean, how many do you want to play of that? I think PV was talking about that was one of his options of being his invitational card, actually, or World Championship card. I'm not a huge fan of that card in this kind of a deck. Like, it is expensive relative to its power and toughness. I mean, specifically relative to its toughness. I think that, like, I've always been down for a Llanowar Visionary type card, even in kind of control-ish ramp decks, but like that doesn't defend you very well. I guess if you make the token, it defends you okay.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you sooner just play Llanowar Visionary if you're already green? Like, Llanowar Visionary into Yorion is actually not that bad. You could play some main deck Yorions to go along with sideboard Yorion in that case.
I think, so Beal Zito's 11th place list featuring 2 Callous Blood Mage and 3 Elspeth's Nightmare. I think the implication here is that you're valuing, at least they're valuing the Graveyard Exile. Because I do think that as a blocker, Callous Blood Mage is just... It's not so great that it makes up for how much stronger of a card Llanowar Visionary is in the straightforward case.
I mean, it's so much better as a Yorion enabler, as an Elder Gargaroth enabler. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Callous Blood Mage seems pretty mediocre to me in this strategy.
It's a fine card. I just wouldn't let one in this strategy. I agree with you. Something that both of these, actually, basically every deck we've been talking about has had access to is a little bit of Test of Talents action on the sideboard. Test of Talents is that new 1 and a blue instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that spell and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So it is a negate, but instead of being able to counter enchantments, planeswalkers, artifacts, stuff like that, it's just instants or sorceries. However, on balance, you get to lobotomize them for them. So you get to take all the Emergent Ultimatums out of their deck.
That's very powerful. Or like if they were playing like a really, really good, fast, powerful combo deck, like you could take all their flings, as an example.
Yeah, if such a deck exists.
That's just an example. If they were going to fling you.
Yeah, if they were going to do that. But I think this card is correctly identified as it is kind of what it is. It's not really not a lot of subtlety here. If you're losing to some key card, some key sorcery or instant, this is a fine sideboard option, and it's also cheap enough and efficient enough you can just use it in the thick of things, like just counter their cultivate or something.
Yeah, I like it a lot. You know what I like about this deck, also the previous deck we were looking at with Solve the Equation, is just the Jawari disruptions that are part of the instant/land package. I actually think casting Jawari Disruption is going to be one of the key things at this stage of kind of the emerging Strixhaven metagame, because I think the Prismari Command sort of decks are going to be the hot deck right now, or various forms of those, and I think they're going to put out material in terms of those treasures, and they're going to tap out on turn 2, turn 3 for something significant, and a 2 casting cost counterspell that can counter things regardless of what color they are, regardless of what kind of card they are, and then also tax them for the treasure, which in fact is taxing them for, the Magma Opus, like an actual full card. I think it's huge. And it's just a product of people being very tight on mana on around like turn 3, turn 4. Obviously, they're way less tight on mana once their engines are off, but I think they might never get there.
So did you see the new kind of sacrifice deck? Like the Mardu Sacrifice. I guess not even Mardu. It's really Rakdos, but there's a Mardu aspect that you can get to with the pathways. The 17th place wordy 3/3/3 list, on the surface it looks kind of like a Rakdos Sacrifice deck, but with a ton of weird card choices. There's a few things you always see, like Claim the Firstborn and Village Rites. And then there's some cards where you're like, okay, I guess, Bone Crusher Giant, fine, it's a powerful card. But it's got a much more token aspect to it with, Forbidden Friendship and Bastion of Remembrance are both kind of like, okay, role-playing, not exactly first stringers, but fine. But you got a couple of powerful new lesson cards, Eye Twitch and Hunt for Specimens. Eye Twitch being the 1/1 flyer, when it dies you learn. This is the best one. And then Hunt for Specimen, 1 and a black, get a 1/1 pest and learn. And the big thing you're learning for is primarily pest summoning. There's actually 3 copies of pest summoning in the sideboard.
That's just all on plan for this deck.
Totally. And then you've got, as a backup plan, both Illuminate History and Necrotic Fumes.
So
Illuminate History giving you a little bit of selection later in the game, being able to just keep your foot on the gas, and then Necrotic Fumes giving you a way to deal with a problematic creature or a planeswalker.
So, we talked about lessons and learns a little bit past couple of weeks, and I totally underestimated Eye Twitch as a potential playable card, but it's obvious, right? This is
It was, yeah.
1/1 flyer for 1 has been staple, when it was Lantern Kami and so on and so forth. In black, this one has a kind of a Hunted Witness sort of aspect to it. Is a random lesson in your hand better than a 1/1 creature? In fact, Pest Summoning is 2 1/1 creatures. Right? So
in time, yeah.
So
there's a big part of the reason you can afford to throw a bunch of cards away like this, though, is that your Hunt for Specimens and Forbidden Friendship and Eye Twitch, they all stack to give you tons of extra cards when you plumb the Forbidden. Plumb the Forbidden's that Village Rites variant, 1 and a black, so it costs twice as much, and then you draw a card and lose a life, so you do lose a life instead of just not. But on balance, you get to storm it. But you can sacrifice as many creatures as you want. So when you play it, you can just cycle it to draw a card and lose a life. But if you want, you can sacrifice any number of creatures to just sort of skeletal scrying Pain Geyser yourself,
Oh yeah, but only for 1 and a B, right? Skeletal Scrying required you to go to be X.
Totally, and this is so good with Eye Twitch, getting to proc that learn, and it's so good with Claim the Firstborn, and all of this stuff. Having like a big way to sacrifice all your creatures at once, so good with Bastion of Remembrances.
Yeah, I think this deck is pretty exciting. Some of this stuff is a little odd to me. Like, I feel like Kroxa of Deathhunger is only a 2 of and only in the sideboard. It seems kind of weird, right? Given this deck has got like 4 Village Rites, they can do the cheaty play.
Yeah, but this deck's definitely it starts off with not really anything worth killing, right? Like Forbidden Friendship, Hunt for Specimens, Eye Twitch, Bastion of Remembrance. All of this is token action that isn't worth using kill spells on. Bonecrusher Giant isn't even like desirable to kill. Like you've already gotten the stomp out of it. Plus they actually take damage if they try to kill the giant that way. And then you look at Extus Auric Overlord and you're like, well, that's awesome to kill. And that would be true, but that's not really why you're playing Extus. You've got some pathways because they're basically free, giving you the option to play it as Extus. But the reason you're playing it in this deck is definitely you're in for the backside. The backside, Awaken the Blood Avatar. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, but it's the 6 black-red sorcery. As an additional cost, you may sacrifice any number of creatures, and Awaken the Blood Avatar costs 2 less for each. So you sacrifice a bunch of tokens, play this card for cheap.
It can be as cheap as BR, right?
Right. And frequently you'll play it for 4, but it's easy to play for 2. And each opponent sacrifices a creature, create a 3/6 black and red avatar token with haste, and whenever this creature attacks, it deals 3 damage to each opponent. So one way to think of it is that if you just sacrifice 3 tokens, and you spend your 2 mana, and you sack 3 tokens, let's look at what each of your tokens gave you. One of your tokens edicts your opponent. Boom. Already that's like a huge upgrade for you, right? It's not worth the card that you spend on Awaken the Blood Avatar, but just, the token turning into an edict is a big upgrade.
I mean, if they're only creatures like Galazeth Prismari, it seems pretty great.
And then one of your tokens upgrades into a 3/6 with haste. That's pretty sick. And then one of your tokens upgrades into 3 damage to your opponent's face, plus the implication that avatar that you made is actually doing 6 a turn instead of 3. So I think Awaken the Blood Avatar very well used in this deck. But that's the reason you don't see the more Crocs action, is that you're not – it's kind of like the wanting to play with all Mulldrifters, no Baneslayers type of thing,
Do you think – I mean, you could just play Extus and then just, get back these other, Eye Twitches and Bonecrusher Giants It's not even that exciting to have Extus, I guess.
No, it's just pretty close to free, and sometimes it's good. Because, like, if you don't have any creatures, you can't really awaken the Blood Avatar well, so it's kind of sweet that you can just drop Extus and it's like a must-kill threat.
Yeah. I think this deck is pretty exciting. I feel like this is going to be like one of the decks that you're just going to have to understand how to play against in the format. Like Bastion of Remembrance, if you haven't played against it before, it's like a disorienting card to play against, right? Like because of the life gain, and like also because their guys are all pretty garbagey. So it's like they're defending themselves and tinging you and gaining life, but you still have to respect it. And certainly when there's multiple copies of Bastion of Remembrance in play, that can be real. It is an I would just say an odd experience to play against if you're not used to.
What do you think of the mono red, the new edition Hall Monitor, the Wizard Shaman red for a 1/1 haste? And this one's bonus ability for being on a 1/1 haste is the 1 in a red tap, target creature can't block this turn.
So 1/1 haste is welcome, right? So that card is very, very welcome. I think that probably we're going to see this pushed even further soon. But the added ability to make it so that somebody can't block, that's really significant. Like imagine that you had, I was going to say a Baneslayer Angel. You could literally have a Baneslayer Angel on defense, right? In City right now. Making that guy not be able to block seems fantastic. Imagine this. Like imagine like they've got two creatures and you've got 3 creatures, right? Like one of your creatures is going to get through, but they pick which one, right? When you have Hall Monitor, you foul the game, right? You only leave them the worst of their potential defenders, and you still get 1 creature through, but it's probably better than the 1/1 you were going to get through if Hall Monitor just attacked.
I agree. I totally like this card. Can you imagine if Heezy had access to this card? I think this card just. I think this is a great card for a deck that's interested in 1/1s with haste for 1.
I think that this card is great, and I think this card is going to see wide play, even outside of mono red. And the reason for that is there's that new card that's R1 for the 2/2, but you can pay 1 and discard and play cards for cheap, right? Like you just want to have a critical mass of things that are super cheap so that you can get paid off by that guy, and like. I think that that's going to be a thing. And then also, I think this card probably could be good in a Showdown of the Scalds deck, right? Like, those decks want to have a lot of cheap things. They also want to be able to put pressure on you early, right? So, and this card has text in the mid-game, right? As good as Fervent Champion is sometimes, Fervent Champion is, like, pretty okay for,
sometimes
a rare creature that's in, a huge percentage of the decks. Since it's been legal, it's like okay sometimes. And then like in the mid game, if you only have 1 Fervent Champion and you don't have like a Rimrock Knight, that guy's not even attacking unless you need it for an Embercleave discount or something. The Hall Monitor actually can be doing something for you. So, and it does the same amount of damage. I mean, the first strike isn't that significant. In sum, I like it. I'm a little sad to see the other guy go, the one who deals damage equal to his power. The card that's an underperformer for me in this archetype is Rimrock Knight. Like you never want to just like throw it like if they have open mana because they might just 2-for-1 you, 3-for-1 you really, right? If they kill your creature, they not only kill your Rimrock Knight, but they not only stop your Boulder Rush, they kill your future Rimrock Knight. So like it's. I guess it's good when you don't have a 2-drop, you can just play something, but I don't know.
So we talked about it on previous, on a previous week, but it did not take long for PV to show up in the top tables. The standard challenge from 417 or 418, one of those mono white Maul of the Skyclave decks, Raiding, God of Worthy, Season Hallowblade, Skyclave Apparition, Luminarch Aspirant, Alseid of Wife's Bounty, that whole sort of thing. 3 Elite Spellbinders. What do you think of Elite Spellbinder in this deck?
I think that it's absolutely appropriate. I told you I thought the card was. I didn't think the card's bad. I just didn't. I'm not that excited by it. I mean, it's. I've played against that card a couple of times on MCGA, and if I lost, I probably would have lost anyway. that's my reading on it. But it's fine. It's a 3/1 flyer for 3, and it has a semi-disruptive ability. It's absolutely fine.
So that's it. Do you mind playing this many 3s?
I think they're different, right? So
they are different, but there's a lot of them.
Redain, God of the Worthy, has a very different job than Skyclave Apparition, right? So I think Elite Spellbinder. I don't know how do I think about this. Elite Spellbinder is bad at combat and pretty good at not actually getting blocked, right? So it's got that going for it. I mean, I think I'd rather have Elite Spellbinder than Skyclave Apparition if I'm playing against a Yorion or a ramp deck, right? And I'd rather have Skyclave Apparition if I'm playing against Mono Red.
Redain's pretty good against binding the old gods, though.
I mean, Redain, I think, is short shrifted in this deck at 2 copies. I mean, this deck's also got 2 copies of Lures of the Dream Knight in the main deck, so.
So there's a little bit different of a Elite Spellbinder deck in 30th place of the Standard Challenge. This is a Winota Joiner of Forces deck. You know, making good use of Elite Spellbinder as a human, but Winota Joiner of Forces it gets a powerful new ally in the form of Professor of Symbology. Another new lesson card showing up, and you're mainly getting either academic probation in order to stall your opponent from, like you can get rid of a key permanent for a turn or disrupt your opponent's hand for a turn, which is so good against ultimatums on the key turn, But you can also go get Introduction to Prophecy if you just want to keep it moving and play some value. And then you can get Reduced to Memory if you just need to control the board. And start from scratch, different ways of controlling the board. Basic Conjuration, in case you just want to go find Winota. This is a lot of dedication to the lesson plan, right?
Yeah, that's saying something. Yeah.
Because there's no other... It's just the Professor of Symbology, right?
Yeah, but I think at the same time, if you look at this deck, it's got tons of specialized creatures, right? It's got everything from Gilded Goose to Lotus Cobra to Basri's Lieutenant, to the jump to 4. Maybe it doesn't want to sideboard too many things out because it's just, 36 creatures, 24 lands. So the sideboard space is maybe at less of a premium than most other decks for purposes of swapping stuff out. Like all the cards that you named are non-creature spells. So,
sure.
Maybe you're not putting a whole lot of non-creature spells in versus your creatures. You want to have a high concentration for Winota.
What do you think of Blade Historian as a high-impact human to flip to Winota?
I mean, Blade Historian seems
You're hitting like a ton of bricks with that one, right?
Really, really high impact sometimes, right? Like, I mean, even the bad version of Blade Historian is just 4 power for 4. Like, it's like essentially 4/3 for 4, which is not good enough. But like, it's way good if you've got like one other thing.
Dude, why can't you is Blade Historian just crazy to play in a mono red deck or a mono white deck?
I think the fact that you can get mono white deck, I don't think it's very good in the main deck. Maybe it's good if you're playing against like a green white or mono green deck, or maybe against like a less kind of removal interactive ramp deck. But it's a huge liability against anybody who has so much as a frostbite, right? Like you're using your 4th turn, that's a lot of mana in the mono white deck versus in the Winota deck. and then you're like, all right, here are my 3/1s or whatever, and then they just frostbite you and kill your other guy, and you're so far behind. So I don't like it there. Mono red, is this better than Torbrand or Embercleave, which is the kind of the comparable stuff that you're going to play at that mana? I don't think it's better. Could you have more? Maybe, but people are not even playing 4 Torbrands right now.
Sure.
So, I don't know.
Do you really need this many humans? 4 Winota, 4 Basari Lieutenant, and 4 Blade Historian. That's so many 4s. And I get that you're a Lotus Cobra, Ilse, and Caryatid, Gilded Goose deck, but, like, that's so many 4s. And, I mean, maybe it's just good to have this many humans, but you already have Elite Spellbinder and Kenrith as well. I mean, maybe it's just good. It's just, I don't know. This deck looks pretty powerful if you face the right opponent that has the wrong removal.
I mean, I just wholly agree with that.
Do you really
this deck is
6?
very clunky, right?
I don't know. You got a lot more acceleration than most Winota decks.
I mean, it's like 24 land, 4 Fabled Passage, including 3 Forest, right? The deck really wants to hit green on turn 1 for Gilded Goose, or at least turn 2 for Lotus Cobra or Ilsine Caryatid. I think there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong against people who'll keep your mana tight. Like, Mono Red would be the best example. If you go first and your mana comes out, I think you're going to bury a deck like Mono Red, utterly demolish Mono White, right? Like, Mono White is, I don't know, not a prayer against this deck if you're on the play and your mana comes out. But, like, if your mana just doesn't come out, I think it's, You see a lot of pathways. Maybe that's a cure. But, like, Needleverge Pathway is not great in your opener.
That's fine, I guess.
I totally get it. Like, this is just a great example of, min-maxing, or not actually min-maxing is the wrong thing. Like, you have, if you're like risk versus reward, a lot of things can go wrong in your non-spell part of your deck, but your payoff is greater than mono white or mono red if you get your plan going. Like, you have what is more powerful than acceleration? What is more powerful than accelerating into something that further accelerates? Right? Like, Winota into other big spells is like, that's a big, big game.
Sure. So obviously a lot of impact on standard already, but there has been a little bit of action already in, a little higher up. Wondering if you got a chance to check out any of the Pioneer or Modern decks with Strixhaven.
I have, but actually before we do that, can we just look at one other standard deck from the other challenge?
Oh, please.
28th place blue-red deck. So this is also on my mind when I thought that you might be a Prismari Command guy. I know that's a big stretch, but Lucas Dusic's deck, I'm in love with this deck. I kind of don't like it because it is not that exploitative of Strixhaven cards, other than it's got 4 Prismari Command in the main deck. I guess it's like spiritually there because it has the Royal Scions, even though it doesn't have the new version of the Royal Scions.
So you got Frostboil Snarl too.
Yeah, no, that's a good addition. So this deck has got 4 Improbable Alliance, but it's not like any Improbable Alliance deck we've seen before. Like, most of those decks have been kind of more focused on cycling. This deck has got Teferi, Master of Time, and the Royal Scions backing up Improbable Alliance. But the reason I like it so much is it has like 4 main deck Phoenix of Ash, 1 Ox of Agonis in the main deck. And I was just like, you know what this deck tells me? Other than the fact that you can just be like getting Improbable Alliance going, not using any mana, and then dumping some of these escape cards, is this implies a sideboard plan for other blue-red decks by its main deck, right? It's got Ox of Agonis and Phoenix of Ash, and I was thinking, like, well, who was the former Fun Police in Standard? It's Rogues, right? Like, if you're, like, playing against Rogues and you've got, one of the 4-drop, 5-drop, 7-drop, 8-drop decks, like, a lot of stuff can go wrong. They can disrupt you with their, like, kind of light discard/removal stuff. They're like point removal is outstanding against you. Especially if you're investing multiple cards on that. You rarely have extra mana for your permission before you've got a guy out. But you could just sideboard like all these Phoenixes and Oxes that Lucas Dusek has in the main deck in like one of those other fancier blue-red decks, and then just kind of semi-transform against rogues and they're cooked. Like,
see, I kind of feel like this one is the fancy one.
Really? But I think it's differently fancy, but it's so straightforward. Like the cards, I guess, are fancy.
I guess. The thing is that this deck's making itself work harder than I think you kind of need to. It's not inherently bad. It's just you're using there's a lot of fine cards in this deck, and they fit together to build a fine engine. Riding the Improbable Alliance the best thing you can be doing in Standard? Probably not.
It's powerful so long as no one's going over the top of you. The problem is a lot of people
How are people not going to go over the top of you? You're doing stuff like deal 3 for 2 and...
Yeah, there are a lot of ultimatum strategies, right? There are people who are using Luca to get Coma out. Like, Coma can probably overpower an Improbable Alliance. The reason I like this deck is just that implication on the escape cards. Like, I start off as one of the powerful versions of blue-red instead of this, which is, I think, a cuter version of blue-red, and then here's an Ox. Like, my opinion on this is just informed by playing a lot of mono-red on Magic the Gathering Arena, where, like, my rogue's opponents just concede to, like, the first Ox that they flip half the time. And, I mean, they're usually in trouble, right? Like, they're not just like, oh, there's an Ox somewhere in his deck. I better concede. But, like, you know, you're maybe a little ahead on the board. You've got Frostbite, which is good against their tiny creatures. It can remove crabs. You're getting in for damage. And they're like, all right, yeah, I just don't want to deal with this Juggernaut Ancestral Recall also. I think that if a deck that, like, Blue-Red had that as a really, like, dedicating a lot of the space in their sideboard to that, they would just be mauling rogues. That's just what, you know, my mono-red experience is kind of telling me. How do you think about that?
No, I mean, I think that having access to that plan is just so powerful, and one of the reasons why I don't like rogues.
I think that's fair, but rogues is a powerful thing. People are
definitely. I think you just run into people like you who just make me pay, and so to me, right now, the equation just isn't worth it because there's too many people who will do that, and that plan actually works.
All right, so let's talk about Modern for a sec. Biggest thing that I noticed kind of trend-wise across multiple tournaments was just adoption of Thrilling Discovery in the Dredge decks, right? It seemed weird to me because it's like extra colors, but people are happy to Thrilling Discovery. And they're flipping. They were already flipping over Oxes, right?
Yeah, but I mean, a little extra racing, you know, that goes a long way.
Yeah, the 2 life matters a lot. Is that the
well? And
the
also,
you're
just part of it is the real message is that you're just leaning into the Cathartic Reunion experience and just playing 4 of each because you're a life from the loam deck. Again.
Yeah, I guess Thrilling Discovery is a far more powerful kind of discard dig card than ones that just discard dig 1 copy instead of 2 into 3.
Right, and getting to play 8 of that effect lets you build your deck differently because of how reliably you can be doing it that way.
Yeah, and I guess they're like deep red anyway because they have to be able to flash back the Ox, and then they've got Conflagrate as those guys always end game with the Conflagrate, right? Like that's
the plan A anyway.
So that to me, that's like, I think if you're going to be playing Modern, the big thing to deal with is these Dredge decks have just got twice as many Cathartic Reunions, and the new one is a doozy. Gain 2 life.
Yeah, and more than anything, just play 8 copies. You know. What about in Pioneer? Like I know you got to be in for the 1-drop, right? Like the clever Lumamancer in Boros alongside Leonin Light Scribe, and this is obviously in a Soulscar Mage Monastery Swift Spear deck, so you're like doing a lot of that type of thing. And Najin's 4-0 list actually, also has a Dreadhorde Arcanist element to it, and kind of the eyebrow raising favorite hoplite.
I mean, yeah, favorite hoplite is kind of the weakling here, right? With heroic. Heroic just seems like so 5 years ago compared to these other things. Clever Lumimancer. Taking the spot of Soulscar Mage, right? There's only 2 Soulscar Mage in here, 4 Clever Lumimancer in this build.
Well, I love the clever Lumimancer here. It's more just his favorite hoplite. I mean, I guess you got so many tricks, but part of what you're doing is you're playing an infect deck. This is one of those decks that uses Boros Charm to give double strike.
Yeah.
It's like when you're playing with 3 Titan Strengths and 4 Defiant Strike and even Gird for Battle, you can get some really big Lumimancers here.
Yeah. We were talking about before.
I also just like the Reckless Rage lines up right with Clever Lumimancer.
We were saying, is Clever Lumimancer more of a Soulscar Mage or more of a Glistener Elf? I said I thought it was more of a Glistener Elf. Here it is. They're both Glistener Elves in this deck. Like, this deck doesn't have any kind of a Lightning Bolt, right? It has Titan Strength for a red card. I mean, I guess it has. I mean, Reckless Rage is its equivalent, right? But that card is still kind of very on theme with the kind of the buff cards in this deck.
Totally. Another interesting deck. From True American Hero, Little Darwin, whose 4-0 list over at the Pioneer Prelim on 420. This is a thing of beauty. So when you take a look at this deck with 1 Search for Azcanta and 1 Shark Typhoon, you're like, okay, what are your victory conditions? And it's like, okay, well, how many Planeswalkers do you have? Well, there's just the 1 Narset Parter Avails. All right, well, what about big creatures? Well, there's a Torrential Gearhulk and the Scarab God and a Tassiger the Golden Fang and a Nezahal Primal Tide. What? And 1 Brazen Borrower? Sure, I guess, but Nezahal Primal Tide? Wait, what's going on here? Because this is a blue-black deck. When do they have to stoop to having a Nezahal Primal Tide? 1 Bloodchief's Thirst, 1 Commit Memory, 1 Extinction Event, 1 Shadow's Verdict, 1 Thoughtseize. 1 Thoughtseize? That's the smoking gun. You see, this is a Lutri, the Spell Chaser deck. Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I didn't even realize this was a Lutri, the Spell Chaser deck. I thought that Pro Tour Hall of Famer Little Darwin was just having fun.
Well, I'm not saying he wasn't having fun. I'm just saying he's doing a lot more than just having fun, man. Dude, how sick is Lutri in this deck, man?
This is exactly like... I think this was the dream, right?
Yeah, dude.
Oh my God.
It's not even just that you're up a card. The card you're up is a 3/2 flash that lets you copy one of your instants or sorceries. Yeah, so you can just kill 2 things.
It's too bad they changed the companion rule. I mean, that's probably the only time I'm ever going to say that sentence. But it is too bad that they changed the companion rule, because I feel like if you go through this many hoops and this much deck building cost, you should at least get the value of your Lutri.
Well, you still do. You're saying without paying for it?
Yeah, I mean, just go. Just go. Not get ready to go and then go.
This is even a deck that's above average at being able to afford to pay for it.
It's got 26 lands.
But it's also just got a lot of cheap interaction that lets you 1 for 1, and then paying for it something to do with your mana while you're hanging out.
Yeah, I buy that. It's got cycling and stuff, which is virtual lands, cling to dust. Yes, I think this is... I vote for this deck as deck of the week
obviously.
On pure cuteness.
Oh, yeah. It's unquestionably. Plus, the deck itself is pretty cute.
It is. It's adorable. I mean, first of all, Lutri is adorable.
I just meant Little Darwin, but
All right.
Yeah, Lutri.
Outside of the Lutri deck, what's your favorite thing that we talked about this week, enabled by Strixhaven?
I mean, maybe it's too straightforward, but I really like the new blue-red, and I think this is only the beginning.
Yeah, I think the new blue-red, the kind of the 7 dragons Draconic Intervention type deck. Yeah, I think that deck is going to be, that's just a wall of the building that is the standard metagame, and it's either going to evolve to like its perfect form, or it's just going to be how it is, and you got to get past it, or you're not going to win.
Yep. All right, dude. See you next week when we don't add 3 mana to our mana pool that can only be used to play our commander, but somebody else's.
I'll make sure not to do that. All right, bye-bye.
In life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the love, it kept me alive. Visions of better weather, light inside.